Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede, and welcome to Facing South Florida. In a few minutes, we will be joined by Ileana Ros-Lehtinen in her final appearance on Facing South Florida as a member of Congress. After nearly 30 years, her term is up in a couple weeks, and we will talk to her about her time in Congress and how our politics have changed. But first, the commission appointed to investigate the Stoneman Douglas shooting is out with its draft report. It is more than 400 pages long and includes dozens of recommendations on how to avoid a repeat of this tragedy. My colleague, Carrie Codd, filed this report.
In a letter to the commission investigating the Parkland shootings, Broward School Superintendent Robert Runcie told them that the Broward School District is planning to make some major safety changes recommended by the commission. Specifically, the district is discussing adding hard corners or safe spaces inside classrooms, allowing any staff member to call a code red, and giving the Broward Sheriff's Office access to live video feeds from schools during threats.
They're extremely significant to making the school safer.
Lori Aladef's daughter, Alyssa, was murdered at MSD. Aladef is now a Broward School Board member. She says hard corners might have saved her daughter's life.
She was shot the first time, and the shooter went across the hallway, and he came back at her again, and she didn't move, and she was in the direct line of fire. But if that hard corner was there, she could have ran to that area and hypothetically could still be alive today.
Gina Montalto was murdered at Stoneman Douglas. Her father, Tony, said he believes the work of the Stoneman Douglas Commission pushed the Broward School District to make these safety changes and that they're long overdue.
I'm disappointed that it took them almost 10 months to realize that something needed to be done.
The school district also announced they would hire an outside firm to look into their policies related to the shooting and the educational history of the confessed shooter, Nicholas Cruz. During Thursday's commission meeting, commissioners took up the issue of the law enforcement response in their draft recommendations. They criticized the actions of BSO Sergeant Brian Miller, the first ranking officer on scene who heard gunshots, then took up a position away from the school and did not move.
Sergeant Miller refused and failed to accept responsibility for the scene, period.
The commission also labeled BSO Parkland Captain Jan Jordan as ineffective and requested that BSO conduct an internal review of 7 deputies and their actions the day of the shooting. Jan Jordan has resigned from BSO, and Sergeant Brian Miller has been placed on administrative duty. The commission said BSO's active shooter policy, which says deputies may confront an active shooter rather than shall confront an active shooter, gave deputies cover to avoid going into the freshman building.
And they decided to be cowards instead of going in and being heroes.
That was my colleague, Carrie Codd. State Senator Lauren Book represents the area around the school as a member of the commission, and she is here with us this morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming in. So there's a lot in this report. So give me what are the key moments in this report for you? What are some of the recommendations you think are vital that the public need to know about?
Well, I think that it is an immense report. After 8 months and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of testimony and videos and everything, I think that this gives us a picture of where we are today. And it should alarm and terrify parents and this community.
Why?
Well, for example, we have schools right now in the state that do not report violent crimes, quite frankly, murder, sexual assault on school campuses to the department, to the district or the department, giving parents a false sense of security when it comes to their student safety. Threat assessments that teachers who have been in the district and had careers for 31 years had never done threat assessments.
Let's talk about what a threat assessment is, just so people understand. In other words, if somebody were to report that a particular student appeared to be a threat to himself or to others at the school, you would report it to a teacher or to an administrator, and then that triggers a certain assessment that needs to be done, paperwork that actually needs to be filled out. But that paperwork may result in some action with the student, but we don't have any idea how many of these threat assessments there are filled out across the state in a given time.
Correct. And some teachers reported never having done a threat assessment in their entire career. Further, those threat assessments stay in the principal's office. If that student who may have been a threat to themselves or others end up moving, that doesn't travel with the student. And so the new school would not know that that student may have had some serious issues. So that's an example of something that is really terrifying and should terrify parents. Beyond that, today, 11 months and 2 days since this massacre, they still do not have a code red policy at the district.
What does that mean, a code red policy?
So active assailant or a code red policy dealing with how do we handle those things within the Broward County Public School system? What do we do if there was a code red? People don't know who can call a code red. And as you read the totality of the report, you know, you had a security monitor in Andrew Medina who saw this shooter get out of an Uber with a rifle bag, and could have stopped the shooter before he entered the 1200 building and did nothing but radio another security monitor who was in the building. That was the totality of his actions until he went to go get former Deputy Peterson.
So one of the aspects of this report that's getting a lot of attention is the idea of making it easier to implement the Guardian program. Because right now, as I understand it, the Guardian program in a particular school district or county can only be moved forward if the sheriff in that county agrees to sort of train folks. One of the recommendations is to remove, I believe, that requirement of the sheriff's involvement. Or explain to me that particular point, but also the larger issue of it seems as if the commission wants to make it easier for teachers and school districts to have schools with teachers armed in them.
So I think that we have to understand the totality of the issue, and I know that there have been a lot of comments made about the Guardian program and the expansion and the recommendation to look at the Guardian program. So number one, we do not have enough law enforcement officers throughout the state to meet the need of a sworn officer, whether it's a deputy or a police officer, at every single school in the state. In Broward County, that's why we have a hybrid of law enforcement officers and guardians here in Broward County. And so there's not enough law enforcement. So even if we wanted only sworn deputies at every school, we simply do not have enough. And so then we talk about the Guardian program. Within 7026, it does state that if the school board votes by a majority to implement the Guardian program, the sheriff would have to implement. There are several districts throughout the state where the sheriff's office does not want to implement the Guardian program, creating a real situation for school districts, quite frankly, and schools that want to implement this program to keep kids safe by having these extra folks on campuses to keep kids safe. And so they have to work with their local governments to pay for officers to be on campuses. The
concern, obviously, that a lot of people raise is that the way to make campuses safer isn't to introduce more guns into the campus.
You know, I think that we need to talk about timely responses. We know that this massacre occurred, that the shooting stopped in 3 minutes and 33 seconds, that it took 69 seconds for the first law enforcement officer to be dispatched. And in that 69 seconds, 22 individuals were shot and or killed in the 1200 building, that those individuals were left defenseless. Those teachers were left defenseless. Those students were left defenseless. Having watched the security footage of the shooting inside of that building, there were 5 different opportunities where the shooter had to reload his weapon, and two times that security monitors, one Coach Hickson and Coach Feist, came in to the building, ran towards the shooter to stop what was happening, and they were killed.
I think, again, part of the concern is that while this is the extreme example to justify it, what happens when there are other incidents that take place on a campus? Students fighting, maybe somebody with a broken bottle or something like that, to where suddenly a teacher trained to carry a firearm may not react in the most responsible way, and therefore you're going to have shootings. You're going to increase the likelihood of shootings and gun discharges in campuses, and often, even police will admit, you don't often hit what you aim at. You know, and in crowded hallways and classrooms, that could become a problem.
Well, and you bring up a good point, and I think that's what 7026 and the original version of the Guardian program speaks to. You cannot utilize your weapon as a guardian within the current Guardian program unless it's for an active assailant.
There's an old expression, you know, give a man a hammer and everything looks like a nail. give somebody a gun and deputize them to be law enforcement as in addition to their school responsibilities, they may start acting more as law enforcement and less as an educator.
Well, I would tell you that the Guardian program does exist. It's implemented here again in Broward County, and what this recommendation would do would simply expand it to willing participants. Again, they would have to go through that training, and if the district implemented the Guardian program at all. And so I think that, again, it's if the district itself and the school board voted to put the Guardian program in place, that then the sheriff would have to train and deputize these guardians.
What happens now? Now that you the dozens of recommendations you have in there, it's an exhaustive report. It is amazing the work that the commission did to break it down second by second, frame by frame almost in some respect, exactly what happened, looking through the history of how he was dealt with in the mental health system, the school system, the response by the sheriff's deputy. It is a remarkable document. What happens now to it? How do we make sure that this just doesn't go on a shelf somewhere? And they thank you very much for your help. You're in the state Senate, so what will the legislature do?
So when the finalized report is submitted, it will go to the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, and the Governor. And I am already working on several of the pieces that I know must be fixed within some of the universes that deal with mental health, some of the educational components to it. And then we're going to look to leadership.
I apologize. It's going to go, but we only have a little bit of time left. The bottom line is this tragedy was avoidable. This was preventable, correct?
This tragedy was avoidable on so many different levels and in so many different ways. And I have seen more, know more, won't be able to unsee the things that I've seen. And I think that we should all be righteously angry at districts across our state that are currently not doing all that they could do to keep children safe. There's a lot in here that we didn't touch upon: communication systems, law enforcement response, a whole host of things. I think that when people read this, will be hopefully their eyes will be open to some of the things that happened.
And it's available online, and we'll make a link available as well. Lauren, I want to have you come back as we get closer to the anniversary and as the session starts getting and bills start being formed, and we'll talk more about this. This is very important.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, up next, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, the longest serving member of Congress from Florida, is retiring, and she's joining us after the break.